Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Belliveau, here today with guest Eryn Steele on the All Aboard with Rob Belliveau podcast. Welcome, Eryn.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I am great. I am so excited to have you on the show today. Being from Halifax, having a company called Halifax Learning, it's great to be helping organizations like yours right in our back door. We're going to talk about Halifax Learning and this thing called spell read, and I was always fascinated about it from the beginning. So yeah, why don't you tell our listeners a bit about who is Halifax Learning, and what do you do?
So Halifax Learning is a very passionate, small group of women leaders. Even though we're a small group, we have a very large goal, and that is to be a big part of helping to eradicate illiteracy in Nova Scotia, in Canada, and through this amazing these online platforms, that can be globally. Geographical limitation is kind of off the table.
That's a lofty goal, very lofty, but commendable.
It is, but you know what? Change is happening. And
Okay.
we're right in the middle of seeing a very profound change across our country, and how educators are really, looking at what it means to bring in effective literacy remediation programs for students, and how that's really going to change the game for those struggling readers. And it's really it all goes back to structured literacy and science of reading, which is something that the original creator of spell read, Dr. K. McPhee from Prince Edward Island, started embracing way back in the 90s. So it's been
even the spell read program is rooted right here in the Maritimes.
100%. Yep, from Prince Edward Island.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So the spell read programming was adopted, and your team now uses that to educate folks to improve literacy, as you mentioned, and that the people that you train, they're both educators themselves and children. So you're trying to squeeze this out from all ends, are you?
Exactly. We have had an in-person clinic in Halifax since 1996, I believe. Wow. Yeah, so it's been a long time. So in-person teachers working with students in and around HRM, advancing them through the program with the goal of really changing the way the brain responds to reading. And making it so that these kids can read at their grade level. So, that's how everything started. And now today we still have that in-person clinic, which really acts as a research hub. There's a lot of research happening with those in-person students here in Nova Scotia. And then we have our teacher training, which being a big part of our relationship with NeonTrain, and our online clinic as well too.
Right. So spell read is helping improve literacy across the board. Let's just shift back a little bit to your path into this of being an educator. You've done some work in different areas, different regions. Yeah. How did Eryn Steele end up at spell read?
So I ended up here after, I suppose, that very, finishing university and deciding, oh dear, I don't know what I'm going to do in life, and throwing a backpack on and with no money in my pocket, hopping on a plane and going to Europe. And while backpacking around, I had a bunch of odd jobs, just trying to figure things out. And I had an opportunity to work in a community in Spain, speaking English, just kind of on the fly, and actually doing some tutoring in French. And when I came back to Canada and thought, okay, it's time to start real life, what are some things I'd like to do? I actually started working with Halifax Learning and spell read, and as a teacher. And
cool.
Yeah, and it grew from there.
And now you're managing the teaching programs, right?
So I'm the director of teacher training at Halifax Learning. Yep. So that's kind of where things are are now.
That's awesome. So the pathway there, we have this program Spell Read that was brought in what was it, 96, 97? Halifax Learning was created with Spell Read around then.
So yeah, so Spell Read was created by
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Kay McPhee in Prince Edward Island, and then Dr. Kay McPhee really wanted to ensure that this program that she was pouring her life's work into was
Mm-hmm.
aligned with the research. So along the way, she met and worked with some of the top researchers in North America. One
Mm-hmm.
being Dr. Joe Torgerson,
Okay.
from the Florida Center for Reading Research. And also she connected with Dr. Wayne McDonald, who is the former chair of psychology at the IWK here in Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
And through Dr. McDonald's support and really recognizing that he would see a lot of young people that were not meeting literacy outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
and whether they had a learning disability or whatever that challenge was, he wanted something to be able to refer them to. And he met Kay, and then that
All
relationship
just came
yep,
together.
all came together. And Kay brought Spell Read to
Mm-hmm.
Halifax with the support of Dr. McDonald, and then Halifax Learning was created.
And this is all tied in with some other, some different laws and policy changes over the years. The Leave No Child Behind, is it? Or what was the one in Florida? There was some type of a law or policy movement that helped push some of this into the forefront.
Yeah, the No Child Left Behind policy through, and I could get my history wrong here, or my fact wrong, but it was George W. Bush, his
Yep.
policy. And with that, we had a really wonderful opportunity that also kind of sprung up years before, because Dr. McPhee was working with Dr. Joe Torgerson from the Florida Center for
Who
Reading.
had helped develop part of that. Was it not part of the underlying base?
You got a fact check there, Rob. I'm not sure. That's a fact check. But through that relationship, we were brought in as an intervention program in Polk County, Florida, through the No Child Left Behind Act. And then the then governor was also a Jeb Bush, I think it was.
Yep.
So we went down there and we worked with about 700 students in grades 9 and 10 in Polk County. And we also trained, and I was part of this, I think it was about 40 teachers across 6 high schools. So they were teachers and paraprofessionals. And that was sort of where my teacher training experience started, was
started to flourish
on the ground in person with teachers. And that was in the early 2000s.
Cool. So we got that all culminating now, and then in 2022 we have the Right to Read report coming out of Ontario that in Canada now pushes this again back to the policy forefront. What kind of impact? I mean, it was garnered out of Ontario, but how did that spill over to the other provinces and territories? Did that have an impact on us in here in Nova Scotia?
Oh, 100%. And I think really the Right to Read report brought to the forefront what many, reading scientists and teachers and educators already knew.
Or had been saying for a long time and just needed that
exactly.
crack to get it out there.
Yeah. Is that, explicit and systematic, instruction in phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, reading comprehension. This is what's going to help all learners. All students can benefit from that.
Right.
And then those students that are significantly behind, I mean, it's a game changer. Yeah.
Really, and the true introduction of allowing science to guide the curriculum path is really what a lot of that was about, right?
Yeah, and one of the subject matter experts, and I feel like that's not the right title, but she was definitely one of the 2 subject matter experts, kind of guiding the Right to Read inquiry and the subsequent report. And one of them is Dr. Jamie Metzala, and she's
Mm-hmm.
the Jarolowski Chair of Learning Disabilities at Mount St. Vincent
Oh,
University.
wow.
So there is a tie to that.
Another tie to the Maritimes.
Yeah, here into
Yeah.
Halifax. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was really fascinating for me to do a little bit of my research on this too. We've been working with you since July of 2021. It's been a few years,
Yeah.
and as I continued to hear and learn more about your curriculum and the impacts you're having on teachers and learners, we at NeonTrain are always about trying to use the right solution to solve the right problem, and seeing any little bit of assistance that us and our Brightspace platform helps Halifax Learning has certainly been rewarding for me and the team. July was the start of some of your work with us, and if we go back, almost 5 years, it's 4 years. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. What was Halifax Learning's world like? Kind of, obviously COVID was the disruptor for some of this, and then entertaining the thought of your programs that are certainly tried and true, and they're effective, and they're working in all the ways that you would want them to. Thinking about transitioning to an online learning platform to help deliver, to augment or expand, some of the reach of your programs, must have been a daunting thought. Talk us through a little bit of that transition of pre-online, solutioning to now. We'll talk about where things are and where they're going, and what was that like before, and what was like through the transition?
Well, with just sort of the teacher training kind of cap on, before the pandemic, we did some teacher training like here in Nova Scotia, where travel was pretty easy and quick. Certainly time consuming, because you're in it. It's making sure that we have the capacity, and that most importantly, the teachers we're working with have the capacity,
have the time,
the time and capacity to put everything down and focus on this for a week essentially. And that's tricky for a lot of professionals. We did do our biggest kind of travel trip was to Montreal, where we worked with a group of teachers in Montreal, and again, just the logistics of the traveling was
and cost.
100%. And then also, a lot of feedback too, that, teachers, the professional development that we were offering, was gold standard and transformative, but really hard to access because timing, the cost, all of those pieces. So our first kind of jump into online learning, we kind of repeated. We used our old format. We just did it using Zoom. And it was amazing to say, oh, wow, we worked with a large group of educators in Ontario, and it worked. But again, the same sort of issues, carving out this big amount of time to
synchronous time. So it's time that has to be scheduled purposely between the educator and the learners, even though the learners are teachers. And that's a logistical, can be a logistical nightmare sometimes.
Yep. Yeah. So that happened. And then we started thinking, okay, like there's got to be a smarter way to do this. And we were introduced to you at NeonTrain, and here we are now.
And here we are.
Yeah.
So that journey coming into our team and working in our programs and with some of our strategic advice, we are not literacy subject matter experts, nor ever would pretend to, but definitely wanted to work with your team to understand how did you want to impact the learning, what tools would be appropriate. You now have programs spread pretty far and abroad using our Brightspace, don't you?
Yeah.
So the ability for you to now do that, the last couple years where things have really started to take off, how do you find that impacts your work? Has it made things a little easier, a little harder? Obviously, as you grow, there's going to be more work, but what has this done for you thinking about pre-online learning and now post-online learning from a programmatic perspective?
Well, I think there's a few different ways of looking at that. Certainly, on one hand, it has freed up capacity
Hmm.
because so what we've done is we initially shifted to a blended approach with
Hmm.
NeonTrain. So teachers would go through a self-directed course, and then we would meet for a specific amount of time in person. So it could
Right.
be in person physically,
Hmm.
or it could be in person via Zoom.
Remote. Yeah.
Remote, yeah. And now what we're doing is we're shifting to it being more of a complete asynchronous approach,
Hmm.
with still some blended where there's some very strategic kind of checkpoints.
Hmm.
So the learner, the teacher, still has someone like myself that there's still a person that they're
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to connect to. So in some ways, like in a big way, it's enabled scalability and capacity,
Hmm.
um, because for me to work with a group of teachers synchronously, that's a lot. We could
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
an exponential amount of teachers going through the course
Yeah.
in an asynchronous capacity. And it allows those, even still with the human touch points, it still allows for that in a really easy way because of the asynchronous part.
Right.
Um, on the other side of it, because now that we're in this, it's like, holy cow, we can do so many things. The other side of things, we're busier than ever developing new content
New
and
content.
new programs.
Yeah.
So it's allowing us to facilitate the training, our historic training that we have, in a really amazing way that's so digestible for the teachers. And we've
Hmm.
had amazing
Hmm.
positive feedback from that. And the learning outcomes of the students remain, 100% gold standard. So
Amazing.
that's exactly what we want. But now we can also focus on, okay, what can we do with this to create, even more support for those teachers by way
Hmm.
of, additional program support or micro courses and
Hmm.
things like that. So
Yeah.
it's been great.
Yeah, the approach you took was was really smart. I mean, we were there to obviously help, but we often recommend for folks that are looking in this transition of having, no online learning at all, or some parts of Zoom and shared folders, as I like to call it, with emails, to just replicating what you're doing then in a system, and just that's the starting point. That's the
Mhm.
crawl, right? And you just started getting used to the methodology of using online learning as a teaching tool, because that's really
Mhm.
what it is. But then as you get comfortable, you start realizing and exploring parts of systems that can just do so many more things
Yeah.
that you didn't even know were possible. And I think your journey really outlines that quite nicely, where talking of the blended and the human component to teaching is still so critical. We never would recommend to remove that where it has value and impact to the teaching and learning.
Mhm.
Online learning is just a tool in the toolbox. It's not the one-stop solution. And I think it's really interesting what you've tapped on, that you've been finding efficiencies both as a business but also teaching, that's allowing for that growth, and that's through exploration of the platform and the tools. And that's been, now you're walking and almost starting to run, which is kind of cool.
Yes, but but we also have, I think, through the whole process, from the walking, I don't think we're running, we're walking fast.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
you guys there supporting us, because that's been really important. And hopefully, we'll be running really, really soon. Like
yeah.
this, yeah. And the only reason we're not, it's just us figuring it all out too, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
it's been it's a marathon.
You touched briefly on outcomes, which is really what is most important at the end of the day. We started the session off today talking about what your vision and goal for Halifax Learning was, to eradicate this problem and bring literacy to everyone who should and deserves to have it. So the transition to online, there would be probably some fear both within your team and company, but also the people that you work with that have known spell read for so many years being so credible. You talk about the gold standard.
Yeah.
You want to maintain those outcomes.
Mhm.
How have you found that outcome discussion been from educators you're teaching to deliver your programs, even the participants of those teachers, the children? What continues to be the feedback that you hear from that?
Well, one thing with that is that the fact that we are able to, like, historically, we've always had educators in Nova Scotia and outside of Nova Scotia as well, too, calling or emailing, saying, how can we access training so we can deliver this?
Yep.
And that's always been the tricky part because we weren't really able to do that unless there was a travel involved with
Right.
it
Right.
and so on. So on one hand, we have so many more teachers across Canada
Mm-hmm.
and as well, in some other countries that have been able to access our training, so they're using it for the
Mm-hmm.
first time. Um, but then those, the results those teachers are having with those students, what we see with the independent reviews that have been done on our students in
Mm-hmm.
Halifax, or the research done on those students in Polk County through the Florida
Yep.
Center for Reading
Yep.
Research, and other experts Kay aligned herself with. It trends, right? Like what the goals that those in-person
Mm-hmm.
kids had, those teachers that have gone through our training blend it,
Yep.
they're teaching in person with this tool now
Right.
in their toolbox
Yep.
students. So the actual the data is there, the feedback from students who
Mm-hmm.
normally would give feedback, that's been really incredible. And just the all around all those little anecdotal things, students
Yeah.
feeling happy and comfortable and confident. I mean, that's a big part of it. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
I have to say really quickly, I mean, we are giving teachers this tool for their toolbox, but these teachers are the ones that are taking it and, creating that safe space for those
Right.
students to learn. And that's a
Right.
huge part of the whole puzzle for
Yeah.
these.
And you talk about the getting the results in even some of the survey data that wasn't previously available. We have found lots of trends in online learning where people are a little more apt to give the feedback online than they may be in class with a paper submission of how did you think or what did this do
Yeah.
for you, which really does give us more actual data that can be useful and more of it to be able to make some educated decisions on future curriculum changes or progressive
Yep.
continuous
Exactly.
continuous improvement, right? So that's incredible. So this has been a fun 22 minutes already, where the journey from in person to online, and now still seeing the trend of your programs increasing with the outcomes increasing. What does the future? What is Eryn really excited about now? Descriptly or non-descriptly for the next 6, 12, 18 months. Where do you think you're going, and what are you looking forward to?
Well, certainly the very meaningful work that we've been doing here in Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
That's we've done a lot of new work over the past few years with Nova Scotian teachers
Mm-hmm.
through a few different initiatives, and I'm really hopeful and excited that will continue. Really
Mm-hmm.
making change right here in our home, and then we've dipped our toes in a number of other provinces
Mm-hmm.
across the country, and I think again with the real understanding that a structured literacy approach is going to reach all learners.
Yep.
Um, things are so things are changing for the right reasons,
Right.
at the right time, and we can be a really big part of that.
That's
Certainly in
exciting.
Ontario, for
Mm-hmm.
sure,
Mm-hmm.
but across the country as well too. Having access to learn how to read. I mean, that's a basic human right,
Yeah.
and every child, regardless of economic status,
Yep.
regardless of geography,
Right.
every child should have access to that. So if we can be a part of that, that would be absolutely incredible.
Sounds like you're getting there, and I can tell you from myself and our team, we're immensely proud of you, and we're humbled that you've chosen to work with us, and we're here to support you as best we can along the way, and can't wait for a follow-up on this to see where in 12 or 16 months things are going.
Yeah.
Eryn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you very much for all of your support that you've guys have given our team at Halifax Learning and myself through this journey, and patience. It's been a really, really positive experience. And it's also the stars definitely aligned, because to be able to also work with a local Nova Scotian business has been, I think it's been important. It's great.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
Amazing. Well, thanks for joining us today, listeners. If you have questions for Eryn or feedback on this podcast, feel free to drop us a line at allaboard@neontrain.com. For everyone out there who listened, appreciate your time today, and we'll catch you next one. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.